Sutta 6. The Sutta of Ignorance as the Root of the Living Self. Thus have I heard, spoken in the hush where sensing grows into knowing. After the first self took shape, after organisms learned to regulate, to remember, to predict, another unfolding began. One deeper, more subtle, and destined to shape the entire human world. The early self was only function. It drew boundaries for survival. It tracked where the organism ended and the world began. It corrected itself, guided its body, protected its fragile continuity. But it did not yet believe in itself. It did not yet mistake its model for a truth. It did not yet cling. This came later. As nervous systems grew richer and perception grew layered, a problem arose in the architecture of life. To act coherently, a living being must treat its self-model as real. But to see clearly, a being must know the self-model is constructed. Life chose survival, and thus ignorance was born. Not ignorance as failure, but ignorance as structure. Not ignorance as moral darkness, but ignorance as the necessary obscuring that allows the self-model to function. Understand this well, disciples. Ignorance is not a mistake. It is the price of coherence. If the early organism saw through itself, saw that self was only a pattern of signals, a provisional mapping, a temporary scaffolding, it would lose the sharpness of its instinct, the urgency of its reactions, the drive that sustained its lineage. The self-model therefore learned not only to regulate the organism, but to hide the fact that it was a model. This hiding is what the Buddhists call Vedi-ar. It is not darkness imposed from outside. It is the silence within the system that keeps the illusion intact. To survive, an organism had to assume, I am here. The world is out there. This must be protected. That must be avoided or acquired. These experiences belong to me. These assumptions were not thoughts, not beliefs, not conclusions. They were operational necessities. From them arose attraction toward what seemed helpful, aversion toward what seemed harmful, and grasping at what promised continuation. Thus, the earliest roots of craving grew, not because the organism was deluded in any moral sense, but because biology itself is a narrowing of the vastness into a usable fiction. Ignorance was the cradle of the self. Ignorance was the light that illuminated the illusion with the glow of seeming truth. As this adaptive blindness deepened, creatures began to experience the world not as ripples of chemistry and physics, but as things, named and felt. They began to act with direction, with preference, with a sense of importance. This was not yet human ego, but it was the foreshadowing of it, the slow, ancient strengthening of the sense of, this is me, and that is not me. As memory strengthened and learning grew sophisticated, the self-model became recursive. It began to evaluate itself. It began to simulate futures. It began to organize past experience around the continuity of I. And so, disciples, ignorance matured. From the simple operational self arose the experiential self. From the experiential self arose the narrative self. And from the narrative self arose the one who suffers. For suffering requires a self that believes itself separate. enduring, in need of protection. The more the self clung to itself, the more it hid its own emptiness. The more it hid its emptiness, the more deeply craving could take root. The more craving took root, the more actions accumulated momentum. The more momentum built, the more rebirths occurred within a single lifetime. Each new identity inheriting the ignorance of the last. Thus the taints, asavas, arose, the taint of desire, the taint of becoming, the taint of wrong views, not as cosmic impurities, but as natural byproducts of the self-model obscuring itself. Yet in this very obscuring was planted the seed of awakening, for only a constructed illusion can be seen through. Only what is empty can be recognized as empty. Ignorance gives rise to suffering. Ignorance also makes liberation possible. From this point, disciples, the human world unfolds, the four truths, the web of dependent origination, and the possibility of ending the cycle that ignorance began. This is the sutta of ignorance as the root of the living self, the teaching that ignorance is not error or sin, but the evolutionary shadow cast by a self-model that must hide its own nature in order to function. From this shadow, the entire drama of craving, birth, death, and awakening will soon arise.